and welcome to this episode of Creature Teachers. With me as always is Rick, and my name is Talia, and today we are learning all about mammals.
All right.
And how are you?
I'm doing great. We brought a number of different mammals with us today. Obviously, we're trying to do some bit of a cross-section here, but mammals are a very, very diverse group of animals, so we'll do what we can. So what makes a mammal?
Mammals are warm-blooded, milk-secreting animals that give birth to live young.
Yep. With the exception of, there's two mammals that don't give birth to live young. Platypus?
Oh, platypus.
And echidnas.
Oh, I know this.
These are two mammals that lay eggs, which is very, very strange, and they're both from Australia or that area of the world, Tasmania, New Zealand. So we do see them in that neck of the woods. But we didn't bring any of those with us today.
Don't have those.
We have your average, ordinary mammals. And we're going to start off with one that many people are very familiar with. As a matter of fact, we're taping this in March, but I know the beginning of February, there is a holiday named after one of these little critters right here. And of course, we're referring to Groundhog Day.
Yes.
So we brought with us one of my favorite mammals. His name is Vinny. And Vinny is a groundhog.
They don't actually have weather predicting powers.
Well, I have to say this about Vinny. We always let our Vinny out on Groundhog Day to find out whether he's going to see his shadow or not. And this year, Vinny decided that he wasn't even going to come out. He wasn't even going to wake up this year. So we think that he is responsible for all this bad weather we've been having lately. But come on over here, Vinny, and sit up for us. No, you got to turn this way so that we can get a good picture of you eating your banana there. All right, you got that? There we go. Okay. All right. So Vinny is wonderful. A groundhog. And these are common throughout the Northeast. We will see them as we go west into, say, Ohio, and then down south, all the way into Georgia. They'll get all the way down that far. Yeah. And there's a lot of relatives of these guys that we'll see around. There's a critter called the marmot. And marmots are also ground squirrels. These are in a group of mammals called ground squirrels. And another very famous ground squirrel is the prairie dog.
Yes.
So we'll see those out in the western United States.
You can see they have a lot of the same types of physical features.
Yes, very much the same features, small ears, and lots of times when we're doing programs with this animal, and we'll ask the kids what they think it is, and we get beaver quite a bit. And beavers are rodents as well. But beavers are the largest rodent in North America, not in the world. Capybaras are, but these guys are another very large rodent, but actually not as big as beavers, or porcupines are the second largest. Beavers can get to be about 50 pounds, and porcupines about 25 pounds. Vinny here, I'll bet you he's probably a good 7-8 pounds. So. And that's a lot of that has to do with the fact that he absolutely loves bananas. So we have to kind of control his banana consumption here, but it does keep him quiet when we're doing programs. There's another couple of names that they call these guys too. They would call them a woodchuck.
Yes, a woodchuck.
And that's a very familiar term here in New England. We call them woodchucks quite often. Matter of fact, when I was growing up, I never heard them called groundhogs. I always heard them called woodchucks. And woodchuck, ironically, has nothing to do with chucking wood. They look like they've got those rodent teeth. If we can see his teeth here, and I don't know if you can get close enough here. Let me give him another little piece of banana. We'll see if we can take a look at his teeth, because if you do, he's got those very familiar rodent teeth, and what we're seeing is two incisors on top and bottom that go past each other, and they kind of scissor off all of the things that they're going to eat.
They're herbivores. In the back,
yep,
right?
Yep, they do have chewing teeth in the back. So they're herbivores. They're going to eat nothing but plant material. And we're familiar with this critter because it gets into your garden all the time. And these can be extremely destructive. And I have a lot of people that will come up to me and say, okay, my number one question is, how do you get rid of them? Very difficult to do, because legally you can't really move them. You can't live trap them and move them.
Their habitat is their habitat.
Right, and of course if we do that, we're making our problem somebody else's, so that's why they don't do that. But they're go-getters. They can dig underground. They can climb a fence. I have seen these guys 10 feet up in an apple tree. So they can get around, and that makes them extremely destructive. They can live quite a long time too. They've been known to live up to 14 years in captivity and sometimes up to 10 years in the wild. And what this means is this animal is a food source for a lot of other predators. Things like foxes and coyotes and such would eat these, and plenty of bird of prey don't fall over, Vinny, would eat this animal. And so if you have an animal like this that's year after year going to be producing young, you know, what it does is it makes for a very stable ecosystem for these predators.
Do they have young while they hibernate? Do they?
No, they have their young in the spring. But when they hibernating, I mean, Vinny doesn't hibernate, but which is why he's rather large and out right now.
So
but when they do hibernate, they can hibernate up to 6 months out of the year. That's just huge when you consider that when they're hibernating, they're not eating or drinking a thing. So.
I see a lot of raptors go for them.
Yes, you will see that quite a bit
here.
And what we see, of course, is that raptors don't eat them in the wintertime because they're hibernating. But raptors do have to worry a lot about snowpack because lots of raptors are going to eat mice and things. And if there's a lot of snowpack, those mice are right underneath the snowpack, and there isn't any food for the raptors. So
we have another animal that can find those little animals underneath the snow.
Yeah.
Later.
Yep. So anyway. Vinny is one of those creatures that's going to get in your garden. He's going to be very, very destructive. But I happen to like these guys a lot. I found that many rodents just have kind of cool personalities, and he happens to be one of them. We have a porcupine and a flying squirrel that are some of my favorites as well. But Vinny's definitely on the top of the list there. Although if I had a garden, I think I'd feel a little bit differently about that. But you ready there? You want that? Okay.
Now, does Vinny like a lot of friends, or does Vinny just prefer to be a woodchuck man?
Well, Vinny
One-man woodchuck.
Vinny gets around. He's, we use him for a lot of our programming. And so he does reside with all the other animals, not in the same enclosures, but he gets along with everybody. And we find that in that situation where we see things like things that are sworn enemies are okay with each other. We have a porcupine in an enclosure very close to our fisher, and those are sworn enemies, and they don't mind each other. So not a big deal there. But all right, let's move along. We have a lot of animals here to see today, so we're going to say goodbye to Vinny. Everybody say bye, Vinny.
Bye, Vinny.
And this is one that happens to be nocturnal, and it's quite common where it comes from, but it looks so different. And we'll see if anyone can tell us what it is. What do you think, Talia?
I think it resembles a lemur.
It does very much resemble a lemur, with the exception of, if we look at the feet on this thing, we'll notice that his feet are missing something that a lemur would have. Yeah, he doesn't have any thumbs. And he looks similar to a golden lemur, but a golden lemur would be a primate. It's a lesser primate, but it's a primate, and it would have thumbs. He is not. He doesn't have those thumbs. He is what's known as a frugivore. So we're seeing with a lot of these mammals is they're very diverse in what they eat as well. And he tends to like to eat bananas and other fruit, and he does quite well with that too. And I think if you look at him, you'll see that he's got a very long tongue as well. So not only is he good at eating fruit, he's also good at pollinating large flowers too. He's going to love that nectar, and he gets his tongue way back into the flower and gets that nectar so that he can. He's going to eat that, and while he does, he's getting pollen all over him.
All over his face.
Move from flower to flower to do that.
And spreading seeds.
We can tell that he's nocturnal simply by looking at his face. If we look at that, we can see those big, huge eyes on him. And also take a good look at his ears too, because his ears, he's constantly moving those ears around. Very, very directional ears, because he really wants to know what's going on around him. He is not. He's very good at climbing trees. He spends most of his time up in the trees. They can move around on the ground, but primarily he's going to stay up in the trees. And he is a perfect prey for things like mid-sized cats and
jaguar
and
jaguar
and even smaller like the margay and things like that.
Awesome.
and bird of prey, especially owls, are going to be able to get him because they're nocturnal. So even things like boa constrictors and stuff. So he's got a lot to worry about when he's out in the woods. He also has a really strange coat. If you could,
I
really
touched
feel
him
that.
and it
Yeah,
feels
you can feel it.
almost
it's a very dense.
like a buzz cut. It's like
Yes.
a buzz cut.
Yep. But this is because he needs to be able to keep the rain off of him.
So it just speeds up and
it's
washes
not,
off?
Yeah, it's not that it's a long coat. It's not there to keep him warm. It's a very, very dense, thick coat because it's trying to keep that moisture from his skin. If the moisture gets to any animal's skin, the possibility is there that they're going to get skin funguses and what have you. So, or exactly, or they could, even if he's come from a rainforest environment where it's quite warm, you could still wind up with exposure in the rainforest. So he wants to make sure that all of that rain and moisture is beating up on the outside rather than getting down to his skin. What's up, buddy? Okay. So what do you think he's related to? He's not a primate.
He looks like he looks like he's related to almost, I want to say, possums.
He does look very, very similar to the possums. And possums, especially the possums, not the opossums, but the possums, the true possums we're going to see in places like Australia and stuff, would also have this very strange prehensile tail that he can hang on with. He's hanging on with his tail and his back legs. This really kind of allows him to be able to use his front feet to wind up using for his food and what have you. So that would give you the indication that he would. But surprisingly, his closest relative is a raccoon. And we would not think this. We have another raccoon relative with us today we're going to see at the very end. But do I have banana on me? He's very good at leaving banana on me. But many times... pardon me?
Got very large hands.
He does, and this has to
Huge
do with
hands.
him being able to move around. They're very, very strange creatures when it comes to their feet. They can move from branch to branch, but look at how deliberate he is in his movements. Unlike monkeys that tend to bounce around and stuff, he will not let go with his tail until he is, has a firm grip with his front feet. So he moves around very effectively.
Like a cat.
But yes, very much so. So very different than any of the primates are, but also very different than any raccoons are too. And the only way we can tell that he's in the raccoon family would be to look at his jaw. He does have very, very similar features in
like
the jaw.
canines.
And he's got very long canines for the size of the animal. And especially being a frugivore, eating nothing but fruit, there's no reason for him to have these big, long canine teeth. However, he does, and so he's got scientists somewhat baffled. I generally ask that question, why do you think he's got these teeth? And a young boy told me one time, well, maybe it's to defend himself, and I never really thought of it that way, but there is that possibility. But I think it's just because he happens to be in that same group of animals as raccoons and such. And we did bring with us a raccoon relative today that happens to have the largest canines of any of those raccoon relatives. So we'll see her later on. But lots of times people see these things and they think that they would be wonderful pets. And what we still have to take into consideration here is that this is a wild animal and deserves an awful lot of respect. I know he's very, very territorial about his cage. There's times when I go to feed him that once I put the food in there, he'll chase me right out. Yeah, and so that's just the way they are. They look like they'd be really cute and a whole lot of fun, but indeed they are wild animals. So
they're so cool.
Yeah, very interesting creature. And we're going to find them from Mexico all the way down into South America. They're considered a nuisance animal in many places because they do eat fruit. And so lots of times farmers are trying to grow a crop of bananas or what have you, and these guys are going to wind up eating all that fruit on them. So, yep. So now we've gotten, the woodchucks that can get in your backyard and get in your garden.
Kinkajous are in your orchards.
Kinkajous are the South American woodchuck. I think they're going to be as devastating to your garden.
And they have long arms.
And they do, indeed.
Not like a cat.
Yeah.
Long arm, like a monkey arm.
Yeah. All right. He does not like to go back in his cage very well. But so let me see if I can get him back in here. And then we're going to move along. Now this one is an animal that I'm sure you can go ahead and take him out.
I know this one really well.
Yep.
Not this
This
particular
is one that we do see as pets. This is not a wild animal. This is a Okay. There we go.
Yay!
This is an animal that we see in pet stores, and they're a domestic animal. And so tell us a little bit about this one, Talia.
This is a ferret. This kind of ferret cannot be released into the wild if you got it and you're like, I don't want it anymore, into the forest. This is a fully domesticated animal. If you put this in the woods after getting it, he won't survive. This has been domesticated for 5,000 to 6,000 years as a pet and as a status symbol. And as you can see, they have very lovely fur, kind of like a weasel. Well, actually, because they're in the weasel family.
Yep.
They also have some pretty good canines, but mostly for chomping down on bugs and such.
These, just like most of the mustelids that we see, which are those weasel-like animals, do have very, very big canine teeth. And originally, they were domesticated to use to catch rodents and things like that. And we see a very long body on them. And this is due to the fact that they're going to get down into a hole, and wherever their head goes, their body can go with them, so that they can move around a lot. But as you said, they're a domestic animal. This is not an animal that we would find anywhere in the wild. Their closest relative would be a European polecat, but we do have a ferret here in the United States, which is very endangered. We see them in the Southwest, and that is called a black-footed ferret. And one of the reasons that there's two main reasons why they're endangered. One is due to the fact that they happen to feed almost exclusively on prairie dogs, and prairie dog populations have been decimated by people who cattle barons who think that they're going to their cattle are going to break their legs in the holes. So they wind up getting rid of a lot of those. So that food source is gone for them. But their big problem now is distemper. They've for some reason got distemper, and distemper has been a big problem. So what they're doing is they're live trapping a lot of these black-footed ferrets, and they're giving them distemper vaccinations and re-releasing them into the wild. So so that's good to see.
That'll trickle right down into their babies, and the babies will get the immunity.
It's going to be a big deal, in the future for them. But these guys are primarily for pets, and we see a lot of people that get them. You can go to any pet shop and find ferrets. They're very, very playful creatures. They're playful from start to finish. I see them at birth being playful, and then at 7 years old, they're on their last legs and they're just as playful. So
7 or 8 is about where they cap out.
And I notice you're not putting them down on the table. I think what happens is they're not terribly bright when it comes to the edge of tables, and they will fall off. They can be litter box trained, and a lot of people will have them in their house and just kind of let them run around like a cat. The problem is they get into everything. They are so curious about everything. And this goes back to when they were at one time a wild creature, and being curious means that you're staying alive in the wild because you're constantly looking for food and smelling different things and what have you. And his cousin, we have a fisher, and a fisher is a cousin to these guys. They're mustelids as well, and I'm always intrigued when I'm watching her because we see her constantly looking at things and constantly aware of what is around. And if you ever had the opportunity to see a fisher in the wild, it's amazing to watch. They do not miss a trick. They are going through the woods. They're looking under rocks. They're looking up in the trees. They climb, they swim, they're everywhere, and that is why they're survivors, because they'll eat just about anything. And they will eat rather large prey too. What we find with mustelids is that they will go after anything, any size. I've seen weasels going after chickens, and it's just crazy to see this little thing, and the chickens are kind of going, what is that?
What is going
on? But that's just due to the fact that they can be quite aggressive. We don't see that so much in ferrets. The only time I ever see ferrets giving a hard time is when they're babies. The babies tend to, they play, they just don't know. They just don't know how sharp their little teeth are. But when they get to be this size, they'll still play. And we do have 2 of these together because they do need to be able to play with one another quite a bit.
Yeah, they actually bond for life. So if they've got a buddy, they can't be separated.
Yep. So this is Gary. This is Gary Ferret, and Gary's partner in crime is at home right now. We didn't bring her today, but her name is Slinky, and Slinky, I think Slinky's actually been with us before. I'm not sure.
We've seen Slinky.
but and of course this long body too. They do have a they do have a backbone too, just like all mammals do. But they are just very, very flexible creatures. Yeah, and,
no problem.
And this allows them to be able to kind of get around too. So. It's funny to watch them kind of glump too, because they just have this big arch. They look like an inchworm, yeah.
Yeah. We don't have
strange.
enough space, or
Yeah, if we could let them run around, it would be very cute to do. But I think he'd probably just start glumping and then fall right off the edge of the table.
we'd lose them.
All right. What do you think, Gary? You want to go back and we'll find somebody else here?
Gary.
Let's do that. Lots of times we're familiar with this animal, but we either might not see them or we may not think that we have too many of them around here, when indeed they're quite a common animal. And let me see if I can get her to come right out here. Come on, sweetheart. Here you go. Okay. And okay. There we go. And so what we have here is something that we're familiar with. We know that this is a fox, but I think a lot of times we don't realize just what we have, and we look at this and just assume that all the foxes we have around here are the same. This is what's known as a gray fox, and we have two species of fox around here. We have a gray fox and a red fox. And you'll also notice with her, she's got quite a bit of red in her. And so if you were to look at the two of them together, it'd be very, very easy to tell them apart, because a red fox is almost exclusively this red color. It does have some black on its feet and black on its face, and it has a white tip on its tail. And so that white tip on the tail is how we can really tell, especially from a distance, whether it's a red or a gray fox. I mean, I can usually look at them and see, because he does have, or she does have, a lot more gray on her. It's a lot more of like a coyote type coat on her.
More bristly.
But the reason that the red foxes have that white tip on their tail, they use that to communicate with each other. And what they're going to do is the reason we see more of those than we see gray foxes is because we're able to see them from a distance. So we can see a gray fox in the woods, but not for very long, because you can't look that far
right
into the woods.
The brush and the camouflage.
And of course there's the camouflage too. Yes, they can, if they're sitting in one place, you won't be able to see them.
No.
Red foxes are more field foxes. So you could see 3/4 of a mile away in a field, and especially when you see that white tail kind of flagging, that's how we can tell that it's a red fox, and we can see it from quite a distance. However, there are as many gray foxes around here as red foxes. Once again, we just don't see them that often, but they are common around here. They are a woodland fox. And being a woodland fox, they tend to spend quite a bit of their time up in trees, which
like the tree fox.
We just generally don't think of foxes as climbing trees, but they're quite good at it. Most of the year they're carnivores, but when we see them in the fall, when we're seeing quite a bit of berries and that type of thing, they will eat a lot of vegetable material when it's available to them. But for the most part, we're going to see them, wintertime, there isn't that stuff around, so they're going to be primarily eating rabbits, mice, things like that, birds.
Now, foxes can actually hear, they have excellent hearing. They can hear the mouse moving underneath the snow and zero in on it. And that's when sometimes you'll see that shot of the red fox just jumping straight up and face down into the snow, where he's right on top of that mouse or whatever the animal is that he's trying to find underneath the snow. And they're right on target every time.
I think that's absolutely amazing.
Me too.
When you think about how focused they have to be on that. I mean, it's a mouse that big, and yet they know exactly where it is so that they can come down and grab it. They're just really, really good at doing that. These guys, will wind up making their dens either on the ground or up in the trees. They tend to like the trees a little bit more, but they don't seem to dig a burrow as much as red foxes do. Red foxes will dig down into the ground. They'll make themselves a burrow. Gray foxes tend to live in like a pile of brush more so than they do. And she's quite old, actually. She's 9 years old now.
Oh, my goodness.
She still looks pretty good for 9, but she does have her winter coat. Now, what happens with her is they will start to wind up blowing their coat out. And when they blow their coat out, they look terrible.
Yeah.
And springtime
Just
rolls
looks like
around,
mange.
and all of a sudden we start seeing all of this hair
It's
come
just
out of her.
huge
And she
gobs
looks like
of
she's
hair.
got the mange. And everything that I have tends to do that. We have these guys in large enclosures outside. So, they're exposed to the air and the temperatures and what have you. So when we start seeing a change in temperature, we start seeing them change their coat and their features quite a bit.
Now she is a vixen, where a male would be a renard.
You got me on that one. I'm not sure. I refer to them as dogs too.
Oh, okay, fine.
So yeah,
Don't pet the fox.
What's funny about her is she doesn't generally dislike that. What she really doesn't like is to have her tail touched.
Oh,
and
well, there you
and
go.
Once again, what we have to take into consideration here.
This is a wild animal.
Yep. And although we've had her since she was 6 weeks old, we raised her, we socialized her. This is so that we can do this and we're not going to stress her out. However, she is a wild animal. One of the things you also may have noticed with her is that she's got short legs.
She does have little dinky legs.
And there's two reasons
Little
for that.
feet.
One, she's a female, so she's a bit smaller than a male would be. But she's quite a bit smaller than a red fox would be. They're
be
a lot
much
larger.
taller,
And they
yes.
tend to be quite a bit taller. And this also has to do with their habitat. She likes to be out in the trees and in the woods. And because she's a climber, she wants to have a low center of gravity. So the lower her feet are, the closer she is to that branch that she's walking on, and the more balanced she's going to be in those trees. Red foxes are looking over grasses and things, and so they want those long legs, and they are not going to be up in the trees looking around like that. She's got really good hearing.
Yes.
So she can hear those things like you were saying before.
Yep, underneath the feet of snow.
And what have you. They are not bothered at all by any of these snowy conditions or anything. One of the things that when we get these heavy snows, I always think that it's rather funny that I'll go out to find these guys and sometimes have to dig them out of the snow.
No.
They're actually right underneath. They have no problem with it. But that doesn't seem to faze them in the least, and cold isn't an issue with them at all. Again, they've got a very, very dense coat this time of year. This coat is designed to really keep them nice and warm.
It's got a bunch of layers to it.
And
Undercoat.
layers to it, and we've got that undercoat, which is quite thick, very close to the skin. That's quite thick, and then these ones on the outside are called guard hairs, and so they'll kind of keep everything in good shape. Are you mad at me? I think she's mad at me now. Yeah. So, all right.
Oh, she's had enough, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll get her back. We have that last one that we want to make sure we have enough time for. Can you just grab her, Carrie, right there? And this one's interesting. I know that we haven't used her before. All right. You want to go in there?
Yeah, I read that foxes are actually the most widespread carnivore, dog carnivore in all over the world.
Yes, and gray foxes especially. These get all the way down into Venezuela.
That's crazy. It's everywhere.
Yeah, so they get around. We've seen them in the rainforest. They don't look like they'd be much for the rainforest, but indeed, you can find them all the way down into the rainforest. Okay.
This is such a cool creature.
Come on, where are you going? Come on. There you go. Come on, you can do it. No, don't eat my microphone. Okay. What we have here is...
This is a Coati-mundi.
Yeah.
This is a member of the raccoon family.
Now, would you have believed that this is a cousin to that Kinkajou? I mean, they both have strange names, but actually, this is a raccoon relative as well. And you can almost see it with her
The
tail. She
ringed
has
tail.
that striped tail, that ringed tail that we're seeing. What are you doing up there? Hey,
Just checking
what are you
stuff
doing? You're not going to eat my hat, are you?
Maybe.
Okay. So she's sometimes just referred to as a coati. And in many parts of, like in Brazil, they call them a quach. So they have some localized names as well. She does like to hang out on my head here. Are you gonna,
You know what she
eat
looks
my
like?
hat?
She looks like a bandicoot.
Yes, yes. And they have that really strange double-jointed nose. If we could see her
It's
nose.
so weird, like
you
the
see her
snout
nose.
moves around.
There it is. And we can kind of squish that nose. And so she can do that because she's going to get that nose into everything there. But she's got a very long, drawn-out face. She reminds me of a of a raccoon that somebody's grabbed its nose and pulled it out. You know, it has that
Yeah.
very long nose. And raccoons and coatis live in the same areas too. Now, when she did that, were you able to see her teeth? She's very, very large canine teeth. And these are an animal that we don't want to mess with too. You know, I know we keep on going back to saying that these are wild animals, and as curious and everything as she is, she can be a handful as well. She doesn't like to go back into her carrier when we take her out like this. And if she has found food, she can be brutal about it. I know that I've seen people who've had these that have tried to take something away from them that wind up with many, many stitches because
She's real strong and really, really fast.
Yeah, she is. But we've had her for a number of years as well. We got her when she was 6 weeks old, and even still, you know, I don't trust her 100% when I'm using her for programs. But again, very curious. And if we look at the feet too, we can see that these hands are very similar to those
strong hands.
Yeah, very strong, but also very similar to those hands that you might see on a raccoon.
Yeah.
They can get into everything.
They can,
They're
like,
always
handle
playing with
things,
stuff.
open a jar.
And when we see them, we see, many times we'll see groups of males together. The females tend to be a little more solitary than the males are, which is a little bit different than most mammals that we see. Most of the time you'll see groups of females and single males. What are you doing with my hat? So, here, you want that? You want to play with that? Okay.
Yes.
So, so it's different with coatis. We'll see a group of males. And then they do this thing with their tail called flagging, where they'll walk along and keep their tail up. They'll just keep it right up. Yeah, and they keep their tail up in the air like that. So you see now she's got something that she wants, and I'm not going to try and take it away from her because we'll just let her have this thing here. But they are omnivores as well. They're going to eat just about anything that they can. Lots of insect material. We see them, we see, no, don't eat that.
Fruit, eggs.
Yep, fruit, eggs,
insects,
lizards,
small lizards.
Small mammals if they can find them. Just anything that they do. And when you see them trying to go for something, they're extremely aggressive. If another coati comes in to try and get their food, they're just plain not going to let them do that. So that they can be quite aggressive. I've seen them in the wild in some really interesting situations. I was in Costa Rica one time, and I saw a female walking along. She didn't even care that I was there. She was just kind of hanging out. She walked right up and by me. And I was able to photograph her. Aww. And I saw her doing a number of things, which was very strange. I saw her go up and she was sniffing. She's looking for bugs in my hair now.
Yeah, she's grooming you.
She was found some bugs in a rotten log with her nose, that double-jointed nose that we're seeing here. You see that nose right there? We can squish that nose. And so that double-jointed nose was going along and was squishing along this log. And then she smelled some bugs, and she took those big, huge front feet of hers with those claws on them and just ripped open that log and wound up getting all those bugs. So they're really, really good at smelling things and finding their food. But then I watched her come out into a clearing, and there happened to be this fig tree in the clearing. And she climbed up the fig tree, and I thought, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity to get some pictures of her. And so she's up there, and she's eating these figs, and I heard this noise on the ground, and I looked down, and there were a number of collared peccaries that had come in, which is a wild boar. It's a kind of a small wild pig.
Little pig thing.
And couldn't figure out what they were doing, and I watched, and what they did was they actually followed her out into this clearing because she went up into this tree and she started dropping. For every fig that she was eating, she was dropping about 10. And so they were under there eating all these figs. And so this is how things get moved around too. Not only is she eating those figs, but all those peccaries are eating the figs too, and they're moving them around, and as they poop in the forest, they're moving those seeds around. So what did you find there?
A button.
Yeah, a button, yeah. So she's going to do that. So
they have a double jointed wrists as well, and ankles.
Double jointed, just about everything. Double jointed nose, double jointed wrists, and she will also be able to walk head first down a tree because her feet are going to turn backwards. Many animals can do this. Squirrels can do this, and raccoons can do this, and what have you. But it does kind of give them an advantage because instead of having to climb backwards down a tree,
they can just pursue
head first
whatever
down a
they're
tree.
after.
Yeah.
Head first.
And, so she can obviously do that. Okay.
She's
I
a brute
think what I'm going to do.
She just throws her weight around.
She does, and of course when we can see, I don't know if you could actually see those big those big teeth on her. And she does have rather large teeth. So what we're going to do now, I think we're going to put her back. Yeah, if we can get her back in here. There we go. You go in? Really?
Woo, good girl.
All right.
Oh, she tweets.
That wasn't bad.
Good girl.
All right.
Now,
So that is a good cross-section of the mammals that we have. Of course, you know, mammals are going to include everything from whales down to these tiniest little shrews. And so we see a real diverse group of animals here when we're talking about mammals. And, you know, everything from primates down to things that aren't the terribly brightest things. So we see a lot of things like opossums and stuff aren't super smart, but you know, mammals are a unique group, and I love to see them, and you know, this is what we have for our mammals, and that's what we have today.
So that's it for this episode of The Creature Teachers. Be sure to tune in next time and see what we have.